there, but it's probably important. So there's one of the aspects of her property that I really liked was there was an intact fence for animals that's 4 foot high that was solid enough to do the job, but it was also overgrown with vines. So it doesn't look like that fence is in use, but it's even more of a barrier because not only do you have to deal with the fence, you got to deal with the vines. I was actually just cutting out a rusted section of fence a few minutes ago. And I mean, just for the 30 feet, I was working on that for, I don't know, an hour trying to pull that stuff out of there. So it's not something where you can just walk up to it with a pair of wire cutters and go snip, snip, snip. But it also provides that concealment aspect of not looking like, not screaming that there's something important here. And you also really have to think about what your risks are. In this area, it's very unlikely that I'm going to have looters and rioters throwing bricks through windows and burning down businesses. There's no businesses here to burn, and there's no CNN cameras for people to protest in front of. One of the things that we do have a lot of here is people breaking into barns because there's a lot of homesteads, there's a lot of farms around here, and where do farmers store tools? In barns. Where are people usually not at night? In barns. So breaking into a barn for a thief is a nice, safe prospect. You're going to find some valuable tools like this. Or at a pawn shop, but brand new. I paid $250 for this in a drill with 2 batteries, and people usually store stuff like this in their barn. I do not store my tools in the barn. I do not store my tools in the workshop. I store my tools somewhere. You get through the dog, then you have to deal with the angry redneck.
Okay, you may have jiggled your mute button or something. So just
It's not on mute.
no talk. Okay,
Talking.
sounds like you're back. I think you may have hit your headset.
Okay.
Say into the mic. Hey guys, can you hear
Hey,
me?
can you hear me?
Okay, keep going.
Okay. But that's one of the things that I do is for the concealment aspect is the places you would think that you're going to find something, you're probably not going to find that thing. You might find like something else, but it's not going to be anything of any value. So I bring that up just to say, you know, different. So it's one of the first things you need to do is assess what are the possibilities of the stuff that you're going to have to deal with. But mostly, I mean, for most people, it's probably going to be some form of breaking and entering / theft. So, you know, for the guys in the city, you know, I see it a lot too is you've got that really rich neighbor who has all the toys and he likes to park all of his toys where? In the driveway so he can show all of his toys off. The by side, you know, he sits out by side. Thing's probably never even seen mud before. But I mean, that's one of those things where it's just screaming. Oh, so what else does he have in the garage? So that's just one of the things to think about is just ways to make it look like there's nothing here worth breaking in over. And then you get into the deterrent side of it. so with her property, on the left side of the driveway, when you're looking towards the road, there's a fence, then there's a pond, then there's a really steep rocky hill, then there's another fence. On the other side of the driveway, there's a fence, there's another steep hill.
Keep talking.
Then there's a pig pasture, so there's 2 sets of fence that you've got to cross. Then there's a beehive. Well, actually, there's 4 beehives with, as she likes to put it, really bitchy bees. And most people are afraid of bees. And the bees are right there where you can see. So, I mean, all of that is a deterrent that if you're going to come onto the property, you're not going to come onto the property that way. And one of the examples I like to use when talking about this is you would think if you watch, all the old World War I movies, not World War II, but World War I, where they're in the trenches. A lot of people think that you would stretch your concertina wire out in rows like this. And that's not actually what they would do. You're going to have to fix that.
Just keep talking.
But what they would actually do is they would have their fence like this. So your bad guys are up here, you're over here, and they would have openings in their concertina wire. I think that's kind of stupid, but in the military, that's what we would call the kill zone. That's the place you don't want to be, because over here, there's a fully automatic belt-fed machine gun pointed right there. And over here, there's a fully automatic belt-fed machine gun pointed right there. Somewhere back here, there's a bunch of howitzers that have that spot right there prearranged. So every gun in your trench is pointed right there. It's a controlled access point. With her property, it's the same. The driveway is the controlled access point. It's the kill zone. So if you're going to come up here where I'm standing right now, you're going to be coming from that direction. There's another gate that's over there, but it's concealed. Unless you know it's there, you're not going to know it's there. We've walked down the road. We walked down the road during the workshop, and I actually pointed it out as we were walking back from base camp over to here, and people are like, oh, cool. I can see where it would be, but I don't see where the path is. So even sitting there pointing that out to people, you don't realize it. So that's another part of the concealment aspect, but it's still an access point that I know about, and it's still an access point that if for some reason we did have angry rioters coming down the street and I was actually going to set this place up in a fully defensible position, it's still going to be in a crossfire between where the different places that I have people set up. And so all of this is just a deterrent, because the last thing, most of your thieves, most of your burglars are not looking for a confrontation. They're not looking for a fight. They're not looking to hurt anybody. They're not looking to shoot anybody. They would prefer to have zero contact. They want to get in, grab something, and get out unnoticed. That's like the perfect scenario for them. They got something and nobody knew they were there. Well, when the only place that you have to come up is the driveway, which is front and center in everybody's view, and it's lit up, like at night, it's very obvious there's no way you're hiding coming in.
So, and you'll have to repeat this question. So, since we don't necessarily have machine guns oriented at the driveway of my place, a motion sensor light would be something we might put there because it would turn on and then we'd be alerted. So repeat that.
Yeah, I mean, you could put a
repeat what I said.
So the question was, since we don't have machine guns, I guess what's the deterrent going to be? Possibly putting like a motion sensor light or something like that in. I mean, that's very good, because another thing you have to remember when somebody's in this mode of doing something nefarious, they're extremely paranoid. So all of a sudden a light comes on. Sure, it could be a motion sensor light that was just detected by them or came on because they walked up, but they don't necessarily know that. And that paranoia is going to be in their head like, was that actually a motion sensor light, or does somebody see me coming up the driveway? So motion sensor lights are good. Anything else like that? I mean, you always see it with the little Halloween toys where you walk by the little scarecrow or whatever, and it goes, ah, ha, 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 ha. You know, putting something like that in your driveway that's going to just make noise. I mean, that's all stuff that even if it is something that's very obvious, the little scarecrow thing, it's still, that's like a dog barking. Now somebody could have heard that. Now somebody could know that you're there. So all of that stuff is just ways to create a deterrent that's going to detract people from wanting to come to your property. And it's kind of similar to the method that Jack Spirko uses to sell a house. You want to be 1% better than everybody else in the neighborhood. It's kind of the same thing. If your house is 1% harder to break into than the guys down the street, they're going to go to the guys down the street. And then obviously all of this funnels into that controlled access. So, obviously out here it's fairly simple because this is in the country. It's a homestead. Like, it's kind of expected that you're going to see lots of welded wire and woven wire fence for animals. Like, it's just normal. But if you live in a residential neighborhood and you start stringing up, that kind of fence, your neighbors are going to be looking at you funny. But, you look at bushes. My parents live in an HOA. Like, pretty typical HOA, pay dues, can't have chickens, all that kind of thing. But they have azaleas lining the front of their property. So, the road is right here, their driveway is right here, and coming in like this is a couple of rows of azaleas that are taller than I am. And I don't know why I'm turning my head to cough. Like, I'm not going to cough on the camera.
Just go.
But, they've got a couple of rows of azaleas that are taller than I am, and they're all grown together. And those don't have thorns, but, like, I've been out there with my dog, and she would be on the other side of the azaleas, and I would call her, and she would run back and forth along the azaleas trying to find a hole that she could fit through to get underneath, and finally she'd just run around. So, when you live in those urban lots, that doesn't necessarily mean that you can't do something like what we have. You just have to think differently about it. If you live in an HOA, this is where that whole the problem is the solution thing. Nobody's going to complain if you put in a bunch of rose bushes.
Okay, I have a question for you to say. How do you handle visibility dead zones? Can't drop a mortar round or set up claymores for home defense, unfortunately. So repeat the question.
Okay, how to set up visibility dead zones? Are you talking about where
handle them? Like she has, or he has, I don't know, has places where they just can't necessarily see from where they are centrally located. So we have a visibility dead zone back over there.
Okay, so a visibility dead zone, an area where you can't see, that you kind of really don't feel like you have control over. So just say that our house is right here, and you've got a hill that kind of comes up like this, and it's a really steep drop, and you can't see back over here. Usually, the way I'm going to handle that is going to go straight to controlling the access. So if I can't see anywhere along here, I want something along here to force you to either have to come here or here,
or make a lot of noise,
where I can see you or make a lot of noise, something to block this, and then I know that there's rose bushes here or something, and then there's something over here. So you're going to have to come around and come through right here where I can see you out of my kitchen window. Now, I don't necessarily know what that's going to look like for you, because I don't know who you are or what your property looks like. But that's usually the approach that I'm going to take, is something along those lines. It's all about controlling the access. So making this such a deterrent that you don't want to come up right here. You're going to go to an easier place. And it's, with mechanics, we call it the path of least resistance. Anytime we're talking about fluid, whether it's lube oil, hydraulic fluid, it always goes to the path of least resistance. So making the path of least resistance where you want it to control where people are going to come, which kind of leads into the next thing that I was going to talk about was, you do have your house here, and most people are going to have a front porch. Actually, let's draw this a little bit bigger. So we've got our house. We've got our front porch. Most people are going to have, a window in here. Then we'll have, sidewalk that comes out to the driveway, which goes out to the road. So obviously, I want my control point, people coming right here to the front door, regardless of why. If it's the mailman, the Amazon delivery dude, the pizza delivery dude, or somebody else, I want them coming right here. So, like I said, HOA, nobody's going to complain about putting in rose bushes, but who said that right here alongside your front porch is the only place that you can put a flower bed? If you go down here to the sidewalk that's right next to the road and you put in a nice, pretty flower bed with all kinds of bushes and roses and shrubs and flowers and everything else, who's going to complain about that? If anything, everybody else is going to be like, oh, that's so pretty. Yeah, so are the really big thorns. Go to the driveway. Use the sidewalk. It's also fairly common for people to have a flower bed alongside their sidewalk. And it doesn't even necessarily have to be something with thorns. There's a certain level of, you have to stay between the lines. When you're driving, everybody is always trained from before you get your learner's permit, stay between the lines. One of the driving courses that I went through years ago, one of the drills that we had to do was really simple, but all it was they blocked the entire road, and you had to close your eyes, and then when you open your eyes, there's a barricade taking up the entire road, and they wanted you to pull into the grass to drive around the roadblock to break that habit of stay between the lines. You got to stay on the road. You're not supposed to go off the road. So people have it in their brain that you don't walk through the flower bed. You'd be amazed at like some of the situations, emergency situations that people get into. You know, there's a fire in the building and there's a perfectly good way to get out right here, but their brain is used the door because that's the way your brain is programmed. So setting stuff up, even in a residential neighborhood, to make it to where people want to come right here and that way. And then one other thing I'll throw in with this too is, you know, it's not just as simple as walking from here to here. You've got to come all the way over here and then up here and then across here and then to the front door. So having stuff so that it's not necessarily a straight shot, there's a pattern that you've got to go through, is another level of a deterrent, I guess you would say.
Okay, next question is, what about like planning for escape plans, hiding, that sort of thing? Is that part of assessing your property for defense?
Oh, absolutely. So
you have to repeat the question because they don't hear me.
Okay, planning for egress, escape, what if you have to evacuate, that kind of thing. Every military branch, everything, there's always an escape plan. Every ship, the one drill that is always required when they get underway, whether it's a military vessel or a cruise ship, is an abandoned ship drill. So do I plan to leave here? No, all of my stuff's here. Like, this is the Alamo for us, but I still have an escape plan. It's over there. I've got 2 4-wheel drive trucks and I got a 4-wheeler. And I know that if I go up the power line access road that's up over here, most people and most vehicles are not going to be able to follow me. So, like, that's my last ditch. I've got to get out of here. I also know that I can take a 4-wheeler and go that direction about, I don't know, 200-300 yards, bypassing the road, and then I can come out on the road, and there's multiple places that I can go from there. So having your egress routes is also a very big priority, because nobody wants to have to abandon ship, but there's some situations where abandoning ship is better than going down with the ship. That whole the captain always goes down with the ship thing, that's a myth.
Okay, what about getting, so you come up with the plan, and we have it 5 steps, which is figure out what might happen, blend in, establish choke points, which you call kill zones. Somebody else called them funnel areas.
Yep.
Include hidden access, which is also hidden escape, and adapt to your reality. So you can't necessarily put barbed wire up in a nice neighborhood and blend in. What about, once that's done, how often and how do you get everybody around you on board with that? Repeat the question.
Okay, so basically when you have,
the question is,
I'm trying.
Okay.
Basically the question is, like, once you've gotten all of this established and you've kind of gotten your situation set up, getting the other people on board, I mean, that's kind of can be delving into the world of psychology. And, you know, depending on your situation, it can be something that if you've got the spouse that's just absolutely not on board, I mean, there's something called disassociation, where regardless of fact, logic, and reason, you can look at something that says that the sky is blue and you're like, no, it's not, it's purple. Like, no, all the science says the sky's blue, and they'll look at it and be like, no, it's not, it's orange. And if you're dealing with that, most of the cases that I've seen, you're not really going to change it. So you've got to work around it. So that's really, because a lot of this always comes down to the mindset. And that's why I try to get people out of the stay between the lines mindset that security is cameras and my AR-15 and a dog. It's a lot more than that. And depending on your situation, it's going to be different from here to there. But just because, you have the capability of putting up a fence, but your wife says, hell no, we're not putting up a fence. What can you do instead of putting up a fence? And really knowing the other person, and I don't consider this to be manipulative, although some people would, but if you know the other person and they're going to say, no, we're not putting in a fence, but you know that they like flowers, and so you're going to put in all the stuff that's going to serve the same purpose of a fence, but it has flowers too, well, where's the problem?
If your family is on board, how often should you go over this? How should you approach that?
If your family is on board, how often should you go over this type of thing? I mean, I would say ongoing, and it should revolve around key points. So, pick a time frame. If no other reason, you go over it annually or quarterly or whatever. Picking a time frame and then just paying enough attention. Like, I don't watch the news at all. Like, the times where I do walk into a room and the news happens to be on in like a lobby of some place or something, I just like, oh, this is why people are suicidal. They're listening to this. But I still hear enough from other people that this big thing happened. So that's a trigger point that you should be looking at. Okay, is all of my security up? Right now, I know we've got a hole in the fence over there. That's a gap in our security, but it's something that I am acutely aware of. So just going through your checklist to make sure that everything's in place and getting your family on board to make sure that they know everything is in place and what isn't in place. And then, any other kind of a trigger point. You have the escape convict situation. And that also allows you to specifically cater to the circumstances that you're in. Because, for the military, if we're responding to, a fire on a boat, we're going to take different equipment with us than if we were responding to a pollution spill. Very much different equipment. The pollution spill thing actually meant that I had to take somebody, put them in a Chevy F650 or a Ford F650 and tow a trailer several hours around multiple rivers and creeks. So it very much changed the way that I approached that situation because of the equipment that we were required to have for that specific situation. So it really does boil down to, it's not a one size fits all kind of a deal, and you should be kind of catering all of this to your specific circumstances and to the situation.
Would you say that for family review at least annually, and then if something happens, that's a trigger to go over it, like if something in the community happens? Or so just repeat it, of course.
The question being, should you be doing it annually, and then for a trigger point event, doing it again as well? I mean, I can't really speak to what you should be doing because I don't know who you are. If you've got, just say, smaller kids, you might want to be doing it quarterly because kids are kids and they're going to get distracted and they're going to forget about it. And, you might want to do it a little bit more often. If it's just you and the wife, just pulling it up, once a year, just to review, go over everything, check all the boxes, make sure that, there wasn't something that fell through the cracks, or we were going to put this in place and we never got around to it. I think at a minimum you should be going over it annually, and then anytime there's a trigger point, you should be going over it because it's going to be situationally dependent at that point.
So, like, if you get the call, a prisoner is on the loose.
Yeah, if you get a call that
if you got the call,
if you get a call that there's a prisoner on the loose, that's a specific trigger point, and it might change the way that you're going to do things, because obviously a prisoner isn't looking to break into your house to steal your flat screen. He's looking for a change of clothes, weapons, a vehicle, money, probably food and water. So, for when I did live in the city, just double checking to make sure all doors and windows are locked, making sure that, I have accountability of all of my weapons. I know where all of my weapons are. And just reinforcing that it's not an easy place to break into. It's why even places where I haven't had security cameras, there are signs that say that there are security cameras, because it's just one of those things. It's that little deterrent that just is like, do you really want to run the risk? So just kind of catering everything to the specific situation that you might be dealing with.
Yeah, and so with security cameras, you can talk through them now?
Yes, security cameras, you can talk through them now, yes.
And with the cheapness of those, it's not that hard if you have Wi-Fi to put a camera out.
Yeah, so it's actually something that I'm looking into, is the security camera realm, of trying to narrow down on some better solutions for here to be able to get more cameras up. Particularly, we're getting ready to get sheep, and so we're going to have them next door. So not just looking at security from somebody breaking in, but security from predators for the sheep too. I would like to be able to put some cameras up there, so it's something I'm looking into to see what's out there and what kind of quality there is for being able to put it up. The difficult part for us here is you can't just put, a little box in the living room and run a wire to, the front door, the back door, and call it good. We've got to have some form of a wireless solution, and that can't necessarily just be on Wi-Fi, because some of the places we want to put cameras, there is no Wi-Fi. So just looking at that. And then also,
EJ says trail cams have come a long way.
Trail cams is one of the things that I am looking into. They do have a Bluetooth and Wi-Fi and a cellular option for trail cams now. So that is something that I am personally looking at. And then, you can get like a 4-pack of fake security cameras, looks just like a real security camera, for like $15-20 on Amazon. Whereas, the real cameras would be, $20 a piece, but you can get a 4-pack for $20. So that's something, just, a little bit of glue or a screw or something, and you throw one up here, throw one up over there, throw 2 up pointed like this, so that if they try to disable that one, they're on that one. Overlapping cameras is always a good idea if you are going to put them up. So, definitely, that's definitely something that's one of the things that I feel like we're kind of lacking on here. So that's something I've been looking at.
Great. Ask their questions from the audience.
Does anybody else have any specific questions?
Put them in all caps.
And put them on all caps, please.
So blind Nicole can see. I think that's everything.
Actually, this one was on a post that just got ripped out from the area I'm working on down there. So I just pulled it off of the old post, and that's on my list of things to do in the next day or two is get that one back up.
Put the cameras up too.
Yeah.
All right. Seeing any questions?
And then the mic got caught in his hair. So thanks everybody for joining in for the May webinar. I hope you found it helpful. If I know some of you fell off, I saw a couple of you fall off and come back on during the webinar. And if that happened and you missed something, I will have the video out to people who attended this webinar officially in email, so you can go back and review the parts that you missed. And that'll be out next week. Yeah, right. And we do have a full presentation on YouTube as well. I hope this helps you just get started with coming up with a plan. I think the first step of wanting to have a plan and getting started with these things, you can go deeply into it. We had some people recommending books and some other stuff that you could read. Once you start thinking about home defense, it's like everything else. It's like canning. First you can some tomatoes. Next thing you know, you can everything, right? You start doing layers. But if you start with these 5 simple steps, which is figure out what might happen, what's most likely to happen, figure out how to blend in. Don't always have all your most expensive stuff on display, those sorts of things. Establish choke points or kill zones. And also consider hidden access for 2 reasons. 1, it's nice to have different ways to get in for people to help you. 2, it's nice to have ways to get out that people may not necessarily realize are there. And then adapt to your reality. If you need to put a big old row of holly, beautiful, green, thorny holly up along the road because a chain link fence is not approved by your HOA and you're not allowed to put a wood fence up, then plant the beautiful green holly if that will work for you. Because I can tell you from personal experience that walking through a big hedge of holly is a very scratchy, uncomfortable affair. And something you can also do with shrubs is trim them up off the ground about, 8 inches. Because if your holly has extra legs, you know where the person's hiding. If you see just one holly stem of the tree, that's one thing. But if you see 2 additional legs, then you know that that's where you need to focus your attention. Can you see if there are any other questions there? Just making sure before we sign off. Don't want to miss anybody. Oh, hold on. We're going to look here. Nope. All right. That was just a big old thank you to Tactical. So, guys, thanks for joining in, and we'll be back next month with another webinar where we're getting better tech. I'll get lighting out next time. I thought the sun would help us, but the sun hurt me, so now I got to get the lights out. Anyway, we will see you next month.